Hi again then guys, and welcome to another specific look, of course, at a certain car from the past, in this occasion of the Forza franchise, a car which, along with a couple of others that we've talked about, and probably some that we'll get to in the future, is strangely left behind. Now, more likely than anything else, it's probably licensing issues, maybe for the car, maybe for the class of racing in particular, because one thing that I noticed when breaking these cars down for these reviews and listing them out and looking through the ones that aren't featured is that there definitely seems to be at least an inclination on Turn 10's part toward removing these 2000s era GT1 cars from the game. That's an interesting choice, and licensing, as I said, is probably the most likely issue, but it is interesting to see that the Maserati stopped with this game, the Saleen S7R was not featured after this game, and after Forza 3 we didn't see the Ferrari 550 GTS either. Very interesting choices. Now, some of those are probably for slightly different reasons. I believe the Ferrari was, but overall it is a shame to see these 2000s era GT1 cars dropping out of the franchise, sometimes quite quickly. For instance, we lost both this and the Saleen after this game. Which is curious as well when we still have the road car, and with Forza Horizon 4 of course, we're seeing a resurgence of Maserati MC12 models, with the regular one, which is in a number of Forza games of course, but also the Horizon edition, and most notably, the Corsa, which of course was my favourite version of the MC12 in Horizon 1, because it was the only Forza game to have it, and it was a brilliant car. One of the most overlooked models, not quite as sharp as an F50 GT and a lot heavier, but still very, very good, and also an absolute unicorn, in fact one of the fastest unicorns of the whole Forza series, and now that one is back. So they clearly are taking some level of interest in bringing back certain MC12s. But with this one I think it might be a little bit different, because of course the Corsa didn't run in any racing, that's kind of the point, it's like the Maserati equivalent of the FXX, but at the same time it would be nice, of course, to see these GT1s back. Now, in terms of spec, this car is very similar in some ways to the road car, given how good the road car already is, but in some ways, of course, significantly better. The engine is still that Enzo-sourced 6-litre V12, naturally aspirated, not the torquiest thing out there with 480 pound-feet, but interestingly, similar in terms of power to the road car. The normal MC12 has 620 horsepower, compared to this one 623. The category of course is R2, it's 824 PI without any upgrades, and you can get it way higher than that. If I recall correctly, I don't think you can push it into R1 class though, which kind of gives you an idea of how good it can be. It's good, but not great, let's put it that way. I would actually say that the road car is more effective in its own way than this racing version is, because in R2 you've got stuff like the Koenigsegg CC GT, the Mazda Furai, I believe the FXX even was that same category. They can destroy this car. They can destroy the Saleen as well, but of course those don't really count because they're these hardcore track-only hypercars, whereas these are actual race cars, which have to submit to the rulebook. And speaking of that rulebook, it's interesting to see how the racing modifications of the MC12 compare to the race modification of the Saleen. Because I would argue that that's this car's best rival in Forza, and yet, if you consider them, although they seem so similar, and they even ran in the same series, the same races, victories went back and forth between them, they're actually a lot more different than you would think. For instance, the Saleen is very similar to an 80s Group C long-tail race car, like a Porsche 962, in terms of its aero design, and it feels that way. Very stable at high speed, the handling gets much heavier, which is really good for stability, and it's very consistent with its handling. It doesn't tend to be twitchy. You can make it slide out, of course, but it's not a twitchy car. The Maserati, on the other hand, if you look at the shape of even the road-going MC12, it's not like that. It's not a long tail. It's actually very similar to a late 90s Le Mans car, a GT1. Or more specifically, a silly GT1, as they're often referred to, like the CLK GTR, the Elise GT1, the Porsche 911 GT1. The Maserati has a very similar shape. It's got the roof scoop, the fixed rear wing. In fact, in particular, the Mercedes is probably the most similar. Very, very similar silhouette to the Maserati MC12, and it shows because those cars are all much heavier and much twitchier than Group C cars tend to be, or at least long-tail Group C cars with the extra stability of the aero. And the funny thing is, it translates here, because this MC12 is not as stable as the Celine, and it is more twitchy. Now, the advantage of that is that potentially on a very tight technical circuit, this could be the more responsive of the two cars. But on an open track, I would probably give the Celine the advantage. Now, in terms of top speed, if I recall correctly, I think the Celine was quicker, although most people don't really use it for that, but it's good to know. And in terms of the raw ability of the car, I would probably give the Celine the edge overall, which is strange for me because I actually am more of a fan of the Maserati MC12. But the difference for me is, I specifically love the MC12 road car. I don't have a huge amount of love for the race car, whereas with the Celine, I pretty much love them both. The race car is brilliant, and the road car, of course, I love even more once again. So if you do get the chance to go back to, for instance, Forza 4, but even to previous games, because this is in 3 and 2, might have even been in the first game as well, I can't remember, but it's definitely in 2, 3 and 4 at least, it's worth a look, because it's 1.1 million credits, it's a very dependable and very fast R2 category vehicle, and if, like me, you are a Maserati fan, it's kind of a no-brainer, because you don't get the chance to use this car in any of the more recent games, and although it would be lovely to see the car back, especially with its best rival from Celine, I just don't see that necessarily happening anytime soon, because it's not just this falling away. They seem to be making that concerted effort, or at least maybe due to those licensing issues, a dropping out of those 2000s GT1 cars, which is a shame, but that certainly seems to be happening and has been for quite a while, considering that this was the last time we saw the car. So overall, definitely worth a look. Looks fantastic, sounds fantastic, certainly isn't slow, that's for sure, but for less experienced drivers, I might actually say go for the Celine. It's a bit more forgiving, whereas this one, it's a bit sharper, a bit more alert, a bit more aggressive, and some people might prefer that. But overall, that's it for this pick. Of course, I will see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.